O mundo mudou. A vitória de Trump bagunçou o tabuleiro político e econômico.
No, those guys are not only against the agenda brought by woke culture, they are also pro-Christian.
Para entender como pensam os intelectuais e cientistas políticos do outro lado do mundo, o Quinto Elemento preparou uma série de entrevistas sobre a política e a geoeconomia pós-Trump num mundo que caminha para a multipolaridade.
Even the Americans are telling now that the unipolar world which existed was not okay and that it should change.
O primeiro entrevistado é Henry Sardaryan, que é reitor em uma das instituições de ensino superior mais prestigiadas da Rússia, além de lecionar como professor visitante na Universidade de Macerata, na Itália. Em 2020, foi nomeado como representante da Federação Russa no Comitê de Especialistas em Administração Pública da ONU. Na entrevista, a gente fala sobre o colapso da atual ordem mundial e o que esperar do futuro.
That it is not natural for a world to be based only on one pillar, only on one column, to have only one basis or only one power which runs the world. That's not okay.
Bem, amigos do Quinto Elemento, estamos de volta em Moscou com o professor Henry Sardaryan. Para falar sobre geopolítica, geoeconomia, é um dos maiores especialistas do assunto aqui em Moscou. Ele é doutor em ciências políticas, professor, decano da Faculdade de Política e Gestão, além de ser representante da Federação Russa na ONU para assuntos da administração pública. Professor, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for inviting.
I really appreciate your time, and ready to discuss some aspects about geopolitics.
Great. For inviting.
Thank you. Это большой честь для меня.
Oh, that's great. Obrigado.
Thank you for your time. Let me start asking some points about geopolitics around the world, mainly considering that you have today this, actually used to have this unipolar order. And suddenly, of course, for many reasons, economic, political, and of course also because of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, you start to have different powers that are contesting this order and challenge this order. And some specialists believe that you face probably a multipolar order. Others think that we will face a bipolar order again, maybe between United States and China or different configurations. How do you feel about that? What's your perspective about this new world order that looks like start to or born or still there, it's just growing up?
That's a nice question, especially if we had 2 or 3 weeks to discuss it. It would be enough. But if we need to take it short, I think. Well, first of all, of course, even the Americans are telling now that the unipolar world which existed was not okay and that it should change. And I think when Americans say that, that's the biggest proof here. But still, there are things to be discussed here. What is a unipolar order? Because usually when a guy studied as a political scientist or at international relations department, he used to learn that during the last 30 years, it was a unique situation when the world order was created without any world war and without any new occurrence of a balance of powers. That's a unique thing because usually before you see that the existing world order was created as a result of the Second World War and the new balance of power which existed after the Second World War. Before it was after the First World War, etc., etc. So here we were usually told that, that's a fantastic thing, but there was no world war and we still have a new world order. I think that's not true. And I think that it was world disorder rather than order because nothing changed. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the international law more or less stayed the same. International organizations and institutions, they mainly stayed more or less the same. And, even the structure of those organizations inside, even the structure didn't change at all, which says that actually de facto the balance of powers has changed on the ground. but the order itself stayed the same. And that's why we had the Security Council of the United Nations, which didn't play any role at all, because when some countries wanted to invade other countries, they didn't have to pay any attention towards the Security Council. They just did it. And that was the way everything, you know, existed and was running for these 30 years. But in reality, I agree with our government, with Russian government, with government of Brazil, with government of many other countries which were telling for these years that it is not natural for a world to be based only on one pillar, only on one column, you know, to have only one basis or only one power which runs the world. That's not okay. And now even that power itself, the United States of America, and their at least the head of the State Department, Marco Rubio, he told the same thing. He told that it was not okay and the world should be multipolar. So when we say that, we should try to understand, first of all, what does it mean to be multipolar? Because you told a nice thing. You told, is the world going to be multipolar or bipolar? Because bipolar is still multipolar because it's more than one. You know, it could be 2, it could be 3, 5, 10, 15. The question is, how many countries are there going to be as a part of the institutionalized way of governance of that world? Are there going to be countries divided by regions, or those countries are going to represent the biggest economies or the biggest military powers? What's going to be the criteria for choosing a country which is a leading country of the new world which comes? My personal opinion, if I had 5 hours, I would tell you pros and cons here and what's good, what's bad. But to make it shorter, I think that the one and only criteria of the future world is going to be the civilization which is represented by this or that country, the religious culture which stands behind the country which is representing that part of the world. Because the world we exist in now is the world where the modernity or modernism, that era of the development of philosophy, of human thought, of humanitarian knowledge, that world is dying right now. That's what we see. When we see Russia, which is, in Russia, all the religions and all the religious groups they can keep their faith, they can follow their traditions, and we love all the religions which exist in our country, but Russia is predominantly an Orthodox country, and the culture which stands behind the Russian Renaissance, which is going on right now, is the Orthodox culture. We see the same thing happening in the United States. Those guys are not just conservatives in terms of social conservatism. Those guys are not only against families which exist between 2 women or a woman, a camel, I don't know, a dog and 3 men. No, those guys are not only against the agenda brought by woke culture, they are also pro-Christian. I can see that pretty oftenly they try to defend Christian values. They say that the positive agenda is determined by the Christianity as a culture and a Christianity as a heritage which should be upkept, which is a great thing, and I'm very happy that this thing is happening right now. We see the same thing in the Muslim world. We see that those countries, for several decades, they were trying to create or to build a so-called modern society and modern political system with the Western law, with Western legal regulation, with Western types of political parties, etc. But it was always fake. In reality, it never functioned the same way as it did in the European countries or in the United States. It was always an attempt to, let's say, to play a role that, look, we have a parliament, we have political parties, we have elections, etc. But everybody knew that's not true, that it's pretty different because the political culture in those countries was different. And now they are going back to their tradition, which someone could be okay with that, someone not, but that's a fact. You could do nothing with that. Even in China, I think we can see now a huge transition, which also includes a lot of links and a lot of integration with Confucian tradition. I can see that for sure. Mm-hmm. So this is the world where at least I think going to be in the coming 5, 10, 15 years. And in that world, the countries, I think, which are going to be leading countries, are going to be not only the biggest economies or biggest military powers, which is important. Of course, if you don't have any economy or you don't have army and armed forces, it's very difficult to be a kind of a world superpower. Of course, that's not going to happen. But still, besides having that, the countries which are going to be mobilized, the countries which are going to be built around not only the idea of personal being, not only idea of individualism, but also the idea of collective good, of common good, those countries are going to be capable of not only becoming superpowers, but also obtaining a possibility to exist. Because the world today is going through terrible transitions. We have so many wars going on in the world. We have so many casualties, so many people leaving their homes and moving to absolutely different places to live. And it is important to understand what should be done by a state in order to survive in these conditions. And I think that, first of all, it's going to be their capability of upkeeping their own tradition, culture, and being themselves, and not changing in order to be correspondent to some progressivist agendas and etc.
That's very, very interesting. Thank you so much for the answer, because I can share with you some very quickly, so you can move forward with the question about hegemony. But what's going on in Brazil? Because what's going on in Brazil was exactly this. At the beginning, we have a political process there, but in the end of the day, they just present the political parties as the left that represent a kind of leftism woke, but on the other hand, even the right is a kind of left-wing liberal democracy, but was still woken as well, because they are defending the democracy or liberal democracy, like based on Fukuyama ideas. So, and it was very strange for the real conservatives and people that believe in religion, because Brazil is a country that's really Christian one, split between Protestants and Catholics, but still we have some ideas that can live together. But the situation was so funny, Professor, that the right-wing parties in Brazil, one is called PL, stands for Liberal Party, and the other one is PP, stands for Progressive Party. That was the conservative party in Brazil. It's totally crazy. And the reaction start is exactly when this kind of American hegemony based on the liberal democracy start to deploy a new, how can I say, civitas wokeism sum, like you have the past, the civitas romanus sum, a kind of civilization that people felt proud to be part of. But suddenly they changed it and try to present a new type of civilization, say, look, this is good. And the reaction was like, no, I don't want this. That's not my life. I don't want this in my life. I don't believe in that. So traditionalism, or at least an order based in transcendental values, were more important than the liberal and materialism ideas. And this reaction came out of the blue. But as now made this short introduction, I'd like to ask you about the American hegemony reaction. Because as long as I can see, of course, there's a kind of split political process in US as well, in a certain way that, yes, they had this liberal democracy hegemony, and that was the base of this unipolar world. Of course, there are also practical consequences of that, like a world based on rules, right? What kind of rules? Just one, but created by them, but it's okay. Even so, they had some practical consequence on that. And suddenly, Trump came and made this new kind of alliance with Silicon Valley, that at the same time, it looks like they are conservatives because they are challenging this globalist financial system that was created as a result of Bretton Woods institutions. But at the same time, they are a little bit technocratic, and looks like they are building up a new deeper state. So it looks like the United States is split, but it's not clear if the countries really polarized. Even so, they are still an impressive, massive military force. There is still a massive entrepreneurs in technology with such good ideas and products in developing new technologies. And they also have some economic influence. In such a way, Trump is trying to challenge this economic order and political order, diplomacy order as well, through this new trade war that he's trying to re-implement or recreate in a different way. Considering this, how you see this American hegemony? How America, or through the Trumpism or a reaction from the liberalists, how this new hegemony how America will try to keep his hegemony in the world, considering the appearance of the multipolar order and this new requirements for different countries to be part of the institutions and have some voice around the world.
Okay, you made a fantastic introduction to this question, very detailed one. So I think, first of all, starting with the issue of the election of Trump, what I think is really important here is not only what is changing in the society of the United States, or which party, which part of the deep state is going to do what. That's important, but that's not the most important thing. The most important thing was that for these 30 years, you, me, any guy in any country of the world, he was told that what's happening in the woke agenda, in the leftist, liberal, progressivist agenda, is something, a sort of, natural way of development of a human being. That it's only a question of time when any society and when everyone is going to be okay with transgender agenda, with propaganda of LGBT and all that stuff, with changing and making some crazy things to children, and it's the agenda they were always pushing forward. And they were always telling, when you told them, that's only one of the schools of the Western philosophy, and as I think that's one of the worst schools which Western philosophy has, but still that's not even the dominant school, or not, for sure, not the only one. Why are you pushing so hard that there is no other alternative, etc.? And they were telling that this way of development of a human society has no alternative. All the human societies in the world, from the United States, Russia, Brazil, China, Saudi Arabia, Australia, South Africa, they are all going to come to the same point we exist in now. That was the idea. And even when you were putting this thing on the question, and when I was telling the same guys that there's going to be a day when it's going to come back, when we are going to have a transition back to a traditional society, they were telling me, can you understand that it's impossible, that the societies in the United States, in the European countries, they have changed so much that it's never going to happen, because we now have NGOs, we have all those political parties, media, leaders and activists, etc. No one is ever going to let this happen. And in case of Trump, we've seen that it was all fake, that all the thing which they were pushing so hard, all the stuff they put into this agenda and were trying to convince all of us that it has no alternative, in reality, that's a completely fake movement which is playing a role of manipulative force of globalist elite, which is trying to destroy any sort of human society, any sort of collective identity which we might have, nationality, religion, being a man or a woman or something, destroy all of this. And Trump, he needed only a week or two. He did like this and it doesn't exist anymore. And we don't see marches of millions, all those guys who were telling that they are going to kill themselves if someone does anything to this agenda. It doesn't happen anymore. Because first of all, I think the majority of people, no matter where, we might have problems with political parties, elites, with political leaders, but people everywhere, more or less, I think they have the same attitude towards what's happening. We don't have the same values. We don't have the same traditions. It's always different, and we should know that, and we should recognize that, and we should, we should have a lot of, let's say, respect for those traditions. But still, the attitude towards the any kind of universal agenda. It doesn't matter, liberal one, Marxist, or any other. Anything which is universalist, which tries to convince people that Russians and, I don't know, Africans, Latin Americans and Chinese, they should be regulated the same way, they should behave the same way, they should have any agenda of this type is going to collapse and has no chance for future. The future is in peculiarity, in recognizing the differences between people, respecting them, and trying to build bridges between us because I think that those differences are beautiful. I would be, it's going to be very pity for me, it's even going to be a tragedy if someday I would love to visit Brazil, and if I come to Brazil and I don't see Brazilian people with their beautiful culture, traditions, history, etc., and I would see some universal type of a citizen, that's going to be terrible for me, and that goes for any country in the world. So as for Trump and whether their party is going to be a dominant force in the United States or not, I think that for the upcoming at least 8, maybe even 12 years, they're going to be okay, I think. Because at least how the things are going right now, I don't see liberals, in that case Democrats, I don't see at least any attempt to change their agenda, to find a new way to address the working class, etc., what they usually did before. I only see that they are trying to run the same thing again and again, and each time it goes even worse and worse. And moreover, you can see that the guys from the Democratic Party, they are mainly represented with this bureaucracy. With the guys, she used to be a prosecutor, this guy used to be a congressman, this guy he's from this family, from that. That's not working class people in reality. And in case of Trump, you see young guys who are very ideologically strong. I mean, they really believe in the stuff they are telling, and I'm sure about that. And they are very young. So I don't see any problems for J.D. Vance or Pete Hegseth or anyone who is surrounding Donald Trump in the coming 4, 8, or 12 years for becoming leader of this force. Moreover, even Trump, I think he looks pretty young and he has a lot of energy. So I think they have a lot of perspective. As for the way to be dominant force in the modern world or not, I don't think that for the existing administration, for the current administration of the United States, that's a really important question. Having hegemony or having domination compared to other countries. I think that that's not so important for them because you should always understand who stands behind any political force. If we create a political party, first of all, people should see what are we doing for our living. What is bringing us our profit? So that's going to be a huge motivation for us. Also, our origin. Where do we have our investments? Do we have any investments around the world or not? The guys who used to be the leaders of the United States, I don't think they really cared about their own country because they were globalists. For them, it was not important. In the morning, they could have their money in the United States. In the evening, they could be in Brussels, then in Paris, then in Rome, and in any other place. And so that's why all around the world, they needed the same regulation, the same, just for a joke, the same transgender people, same completely collapsed types of and fragile types of society, so that there is no problem with changing any government which doesn't suit your group of interests, which creates any kind of problems for your investments, etc. Those guys were financial elite, and they were the representatives of the most globalist force in the world, for whom any type of national border is a problem. Any type of cultural identity is a problem because it might create an obstacle for your projects, for your transactions, and etc. These fellows who just came to power in the United States, not only the Republican Party, but also Make America Great Again movement inside the Republican Party. I'm sure that they are very different from that group of elite. First of all, they care for their own country, not only because of their investments or of their origin, but also they have ideology in their heads, because I listen to what they are talking about, and I more or less understand what kind of books they read. Or who is their favorite author, more or less. I understand who is who's running their favorite podcast, and I see that they really believe in this stuff, which is also important. So, in this agenda, where the United States, as they say, should be great again, that could be obtained also by the fact that the United States shouldn't be trying to dominate around the world, because in short term it seems that it makes it stronger, because if you dominate you can do whatever you want, but in reality you spend too much. You have to buy those completely corrupt European and European Union bureaucratic elites, upkeep all of those structures like USAID or Radio Freedom and everything else. That's too costly, and you usually take that money from your own population. You take it from your kids, you take it from your veterans, from your schools, universities. I think they don't care about this fact too much. Of course, they are not going to become a, second role country in the world. The United States is, if there are, let's say, 5 top countries in the world, according to any criteria, the United States are always in that list, that's for sure. But I want them and any other representative of the Western civilization to understand what is the real Russian position on that issue. Because usually when they want to show what Russia thinks, I don't know where they take this information from. Usually they say, well, Russians, they want to occupy Poland, then go to Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, then maybe bombardment on Paris, and then they are going to occupy London. I don't know where are you reading all this stuff, or where do you take it from? The problem of Russia with the Western civilization is only in one point. There's only one point, is that Russia wants Western civilization to stay local. Nothing else. We don't care how people in Italy or in France or in Germany live. We don't care about this. We are okay if they want to live the way they live now. We are okay with that. We don't care about this. But we want them to understand that that's their own way of living, not the Russian one. That Russia shouldn't be told by anyone how to live, how to organize its society, family, education, and etc. That's the only thing. The Western civilization is a great civilization, same as Confucian civilization or Islamic civilization, Orthodox civilization. Any civilization is great because it represents a huge culture which stands behind it. Western civilization is great civilization, but it should be local. The same as Confucian civilization. It doesn't try to say Russians, why are you not following Confucian traditions? Or the Islamic civilization shouldn't tell any other civilization, why are you not following Islam? Because people are different and they have different cultures. But the Western civilization is the only one which says that it represents universal values. No other civilization does that. All the civilizations recognize its borders, is regulations, norms, traditions, and they usually try to upkeep it. So we even don't have problem with the fact that they don't want to understand that those guys don't want to understand that. We have problems when that starts to have a real influence on us, a real effect. I usually make a joke that if you in your residence, if you have a neighbor who thinks that he's a Napoleon, there's not a problem. The problem is that when you start marching, saluting him, etc., that's the problem. He might think that he's whatever he wants. The important thing is that it doesn't influence you. So that's what is important for Russia. Russia doesn't want Western civilization to be destroyed, or I don't know that. In general, I think that's my personal attitude, that all the Christian nations, we form one big civilization, Christian civilization, which has brought so many good things to humanity. Of course, with the history and the way the things gone, the Christianity was then divided into the Western and the Eastern one. But still, we have so many in common things in our cultures, but also we are different. That should be recognized. And in this case, we just want those differences to stay there. That's okay. If someone is interested, he can always, learn it, study their cultural. Like me myself, I'm a specialist on Roman Catholic political doctrine, the political doctrine of Roman Catholic Church. So that, for me, that's a point of my personal scientific interest. But in general, I think that as soon as we understand that we should stay local, think global, that's okay. Try to solve global issues together, that's great. But stay local. I think that would make the world a much better place to live in.
Do you know that there's a philosopher, I'm bad at names, but I think that's Jean-Claude Michel. And he's a Marxist, a new one, he's French, and he made sometimes an analysis in one of his books. He said a very interesting thing. He said that in the past, the leftism or the liberalism, left wing, used the worker as a kind of revolutionary piece. And that was okay because this connected the left with the working class and the certain way with the middle class. At least in Europe, not Brazil, because middle class Brazil and working class is pretty different. However, he said, look, the problem is that they built up a new bureaucratic administrative class and they forgot the working class.
For sure.
And they use now the trends as the new revolutionary instrument to implement their plans. The problem is that they are not connected with the population, with the people anymore. And this kind of absence of connection is creating this kind of issues for this new kind of civilization they would like to make it. So, on top of that, my question is interesting because 1 year ago, I came here to Russia to discuss. I think that was the first one in the West to come to Russia to interview Alexander Dugin at that time. And I was interesting about his point of view and Russian point of view exactly because in my old school of studies, I learned to extract the truth based on facts and different perspectives, not in propaganda or in slogans. So I came here and made this interview and launched in Brazil. At that time, because of this kind of propaganda, they said, no, Russia want to invade Europe and take care of the German, the UK, the whole world, blah, blah, blah. Basically, it was a kind of funny because I was accused of being a FSB agent of disinformation and helping Russia to conquer Brazil. Totally crazy at that time, but still happened because of...
But still sounds good.
Yeah, but this is kind of propaganda they launched. Yeah. Very funny. But it was funny, of course. At the time, they said, no, after we received money from the government, I say, no, I'm not, but I'm totally open for that. I have an account, so if you want to...
Yeah, you can do that.
Yes, I can send my SWIFT and IBAN account. But it didn't happen. So, but even so, what's interesting behind of this funny history? And of course, because there's a kind of new civilization projects or civilization states or perspectives that are behind of that. In a certain way, we had this liberal democracy that now is splitted in. This is a kind of risk as long as I can see, because we also have this technocratic project and civilization that also plan. I also would like to have economy planned or planned economy. Also, they would like to change the monetary system based in price to a monetary system based in energy. Energy not for based on foods but flows, and this means that also have a control of the whole resource of the world, so they can plan the world properly. And there's a kind of globalism as well. But on the other hand, we have in China this idea of the common destiny of civilization. That's a kind of proposal as well of civilization proposal. And we have the Islam world that also try to present, despite their divisions, internal divisions, they are kind of civilization state as well, but they have to resolve their conflicts, internal conflicts, but they are also have a kind of a theocratic way of organizing itself. And some people in Brazil believe that to have also the Russian project, a kind of Eurasianism, or the idea of to have also the theory of great powers, and we have the Great America, Great Russia, and Great China. But with this soup, as I like to say, the problem is that they have some ideas like the Third Rome, that exactly the idea of the Third Rome again, and people said, oh, this is a kind of a new imperialism as well. So how do you say this, at least, or if you have more, these four this four force or theories that are fighting to try to create a new proposal for civilizations? I will face again, right, a war of civilizations among this fourth or more or different kind of civilization proposal. First question. The second is how to organize it, because in a certain way, you mentioned about the supranational organizations. They organize itself in a legal system based on the liberal democracy system ideas. Okay, now we have different perspectives. We have China. China create different laws. Example, at the sea, in ports. Mainly after the arbitrage they have against Filipinos a couple of years ago. I said, look, I have to be careful of that because I have some conflicts here in the sea. Of course, the Islam is the same. They don't, their perspective of civilization doesn't match exactly with these ideas of liberal ideas, and this has some effects on the legal system. And we have the technocratics and the liberals. So there's this and the reflection. But in Brazil, for example, we realize that liberals, and because they organize the world using this instrument of creating rules in their way, with their ideology behind, they took control of the courts and the legal system. And it's very clear they avoid new ideologies, new way of life, or even the most simple expression of the political wish to live, using today juristocracy as a form to keep let's defend democracy, right? Against what? They are not under attack, they are under criticism, but they think that's attack. And they are using Supreme Courts as agents against this new civilization projects. So I know there's like three questions in one, but how do you see that? How do you see this conflict of project civilizations and how you can harmonize it?
Okay, nice question as well. But first, you started with Marxists and the way their ideology is developing right now. I want to start my answer with one of my favorite jokes made by one of Italian writers and columnist, Indro Montanelli. He was a great writer, I think, and he once said that the lefts like poor people so much that every time they come to power, their number really grows a lot. So that was his idea back several decades ago. And I think that the Marxist agenda faces the crisis not because something went wrong or they did something the way they shouldn't have done, but because they acted exactly the way that ideology prescribed them to. That was a logical development of that ideology. You know, if you read the letters between Antonio Gramsci, the founder of Italian Communist Party, to Lukács, to head of the Hungarian Communist Party, they have this quarrel when one asks, why is it so that the communist revolution or Marxist revolution took place only in Russia, although Russia was the only place it shouldn't have taken place in any way, because if you read Karl Marx, Russia is usually described as a country which is going to be maybe the last one where the revolution is going to take place, because he considered Russia not to be capitalist enough to have this communist revolution. And it didn't take any place in any European society, although they were prescribed to have a Marxist revolution. And the answer they give in those letters is that the Western societies and the citizens or the inhabitants of Western societies, in order to make a revolution take place, they say he should put his class interest higher than anything else. And he says any Westerner, so-called Westerner, European, I don't know, first of all, they consider themselves members of their family. Then they think of themselves as inhabitants of this city, particular city. Then they remember that they are Catholic. And only then they think of themselves as workers, etc. And the prescription here is, I think, is obvious that you should destroy your family, your city, your belonging to kind of a culture, a territory, and destroy the church. And then you might have a working class interest and a revolution. But if you change revolution to any other globalist agenda which you could bring here, consumer society, I don't know, making people live in this so-called meta world, you know, existing in a virtual reality rather than the real one. In any case, this formula is going to work. If you want a human being to be fanatic about something and dedicate his whole time and everything to one and only idea, you should make him stop being part of his collective identity. Because I personally really believe that being a Christian is a great filter for any idea that might make you fanatic about someone or something. When you're a real Christian, you are never going to create an idol for yourself. You know, you are never going to intercept any human being as a, I don't know, as a fantastic creature who is going to change the life of the whole human society around the world. If you're a real Christian, that's never going to happen. That's why those guys usually tend to destroy our religion, first of all. Then you actually asked me a great question, which in reality was about the different geopolitical projects and different, not even projects, but about different geopolitical strategies. Of course, if we are honest enough, we should be sure that the day when all the countries in the world are going to turn on John Lennon's song, take hands and start dancing together, hugging each other, kissing, and you know, and we are not going to have any problems around the world. The day is never going to come.
It's like a big Woodstock.
Yeah. It's never going to happen. Yes. Because human beings are different from that. You can count the number of times you have quarrels, problems with any other human being in your everyday life. Can you imagine at least 10 years without having any quarrels or problems with other humans in your own personal life? No. But the states are consistent of human beings as well. So it's still going to exist. It's going to happen. The reality is that in that world, I think it's much better to have political elites which are so interested and are so dedicated to defending their national interest, to defending their tradition and their society, rather than having these gray political elites, which we cannot understand who they represent. Like with all the honesty, with all the due respect, can someone tell me who was running the United States for the last 4 years before Trump got elected? Now we have this tremendous, fantastic news that a lot of orders, they were signed by an autopan, and he didn't do anything. Everyone saw that guy who was not able to walk from point A to point B without getting hit by something or falling, and everybody were okay with that. Well, no, it's okay, he's very healthy, he's okay, he's good. But if that's happening, it means that there are a group of people who are holding him like this and really playing with him in order to, you know, push forward their own interests. For me, it's much better and much more predictable and much more safe, I think, when we have leaders who are actually popular among their own nations, who actually have the popular vote and they have the popular support. And in the meantime, they care about their national interest. Because believe me, if in the European Union we had 10 governments which cared about their own people, they would never have conflict with Russia. Americans might even be okay with conflict with Russia. Europeans, any European government who would care about their own nation, about their society, the first thing they would do, they would have nice relations with Russia, because you can look at the map and you can see Russia and you can see the European Union. You can see our military capabilities and European ones. Why do you have to provoke Russia again and again? Why do you do that? Because you don't care about your own society and your own nation. I remember when the German Minister of Foreign Affairs, Annalena Baerbock, she was asked about something like whether that corresponds to the German interests or not. And she told, I don't care whether Germans like it or not, I care about Ukrainians. But you're the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Germany. You were elected by that people, not by Ukrainians or, I don't know, Georgians or anybody else. That's your nation, your people who are who you should report to, and who is actually believing you and who gave you this power. So I think what Russia wants, and I think what's going to exist, I hope so at least, that we're going to have a world where China, Russia, Muslim world, Europeans, anyone, they are going to have different strategies. In some points, those strategies are going to collide with each other. At some points, they are going to correspond to each other, and many other civilizations are going to get interested in this. That's going to happen. In any case, it's going to require a procedure of settling issues. You know, a place those countries should meet, and regulations according to which they should try to settle the problems, and also the institutions who are going to be responsible for making sure that everything runs smoothly. In order to do that, we need those countries to be represented. And in many cases, we see that these countries are represented by the leaders who really have the support of their people. You might like them, you might not like them. I don't think that any of these leaders really care about whether someone likes them or not around the world. Their people really support them. And I think maybe you might have another way of, or any, you know, other methodology of understanding what corresponds to a national interest of this country or that country. But I don't think that someone has any doubts that, let's say, President of Russian Federation, the first thing he thinks about and the things he does is trying to keep the Russian national interest and trying to provide us with security. I think that's obvious to anyone. Usually countries are not okay with, not with the fact whether it is so or not, but with the fact that, okay, but that makes Russia too strong and tomorrow they might put pressure on us on this issue or that issue. But the future is going to be like this. Strong nations with strong leaders who represent the real majority of their population, and then a process which is going to bring, it's going to be okay. Now it's very difficult to try even to imagine the shape of that world. But why? Because we don't have the new balance of power. Now, what we see now is that, okay, the NATO tried to contain Russia. NATO tried to fight Russia on the territory of Ukraine. It didn't manage to do so. They didn't have any type of success. They used everything they had and still nothing changed. This is a signal that, okay, now you should recognize Russia, you should sit with Russia right now around the table and start discussing the issues Russia asked you to discuss in 2022. People don't remember this, but before the special military operation began, Russian president and Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs, they asked the Western countries that we have a lot of security issues we want to discuss. We want to discuss the architecture of security on the territory of Europe. Can we please meet and start substantial talks? We were told that you guys, we have nothing to talk with you about. You should know your place, you're nothing, just step away from here. And 3 years later, the Americans are discussing these issues with us. Why? Because they've seen that there is no other way. Not because they like the way our president looks, or maybe, I don't know, they just started reading Russian literature or listening to Russian classical music. No, because the balance of power is now forming in this way. And it's going to be the same way, I'm sure, in Latin America. There's going to be the same in Asia. As soon as the balance of power is forming, after that, those leaders can sit, they can talk, the diplomacy will work, and I'm sure that we'll have new regulations, new institutions, and completely new ways of dealing with all this stuff.
Do you know that in Brazil is a very interesting point you mentioned, because in Brazil, not only Brazil, even in Europe, now I'm living in Lisbon, but even there, what's happened is right wings and traditionalist parties gain force exactly because most of the governments are not connected with the people anymore. In Europe, it's more interesting because we have Brussels and they have the European Union. And for a Portuguese, I'm not Portuguese, so I'm there, I listen to the guys, they say it's totally insane because they have the perception that European Union came from a different universe.
Which is true.
Yeah,
Which is so.
All regulation that they launch is not connected with the real life. The last one, I don't know if you are aware, but was a kind of a bad joke. They said like, I think it was Macron or whatever, European Union, they said, look, I'm recommend all the citizens to keep enough food, medicines to survive 3 days in home. So I asked for a Portuguese that the close friends say, what do you think about that? I said, they're kidding, are they kidding? Because 3 days means that I have to keep untouchable in my income, 10% of my budget, because around 3 days in 30. Do you think that there is money enough for that? That people here that are making like 1,500 euros in average has 10% of their budget, 20% of the budget to keep untouchable every month, waiting for a possibility of a conflict? They are fighting to eat eggs because the price now is getting bigger. So they are fighting to eat eggs, not meat, eggs. It's the same in Brazil. So the food now has increased a lot to say there's impossible. There's a very touchable video that one Brazilian made on TikTok, and he said, look, I'm not complaining that I'm poor. It's not good to be poor. Okay, but I can handle because I will fight against it. The problem is that today I just work to pay my bills, and even so, sometimes I can't. So I said, look, I'm saying that I don't have money to go and buy a sandwich and orange juice, or have a different, or instead of to have one, have 2 cups of coffee. So the reality for the people in the West is getting really bad, nasty. And the governments are totally out of their mind about this. So the right wing now, I think, is born, and now they are assuming this kind of patriotism again. Not national developmentism, but patriotism. Say, look, I'm concerned about Brazil, I'm concerned about Portugal, I'm concerned about German. I want to develop my country, take care of my people, because it's a kind of common sense. All of them are suffering and suffer a lot because of the bad choice made the last 20 years. But come back to BRICS now. BRICS, today is important, at least an important branch. But I'm in doubt if it's already a political organization or unit that really has political force and representative in a certain way. Because BRICS now, of course, has some internal conflicts. Brazil is there. Now Brazil got the presence again. We have the event now in July this year, BRICS event in Brazil. Timor himself is responsible for that. It's not my preference, but okay, it's there. But okay. But at the end of the day, BRICS get importance. The economy of BRICS Plus, is bigger than, the GDP is bigger than G7 already. So BRICS is gaining some economic importance. But at the same time, my question is, what's your perception about this? What's your perception about BRICS as a bloc, a political bloc that could be capable to work together and build internal and concrete agreements, concrete politics, and concrete internal market to develop itself and create a real reaction, or a possibility to create a bloc against the current multilateral institutions that we have around the world?
Okay. Look, again, in your introduction, you had a brilliant idea, which I want to reflect on, and then come back to the question about BRICS. Well, when you're talking about the right-wing movements, what is important here is that we should state that the parties themselves and the ideologies we usually talk about, like Marxist, liberal, conservative, they are mainly the products of the modernity era, which has brought us three global ideologies. One was Marxism, second one was liberalism, and the third one was fascism. And that's why after the Cold War, when the Marxism has lost, and before fascism has lost during the Second World War, when liberalism has stayed alone, everyone who tried to criticize liberalism, if you did it from the right side, they told you you were a fascist guy. If you did it from the left side, like you were not okay with social security, etc., they told you you were a communist. That's the typical way of behavior for the liberals. And every time you say, I don't like liberalism, they say, okay, so what do you want? You want a fascist dictatorship? Why is that happening? Because those three are the only ideologies of modernity. As soon as we step outside of modernity and we go back to our traditional values, we could start thinking of forms and of ideologies and of movements of a different kind. And I think that the real ones are going to be those ideologies and those political forces which have as their basis more transcendental truth rather than ideas of some sort of philosophers who are just writing their new agendas, projects, 250 or 200, I don't know what. And in our case, in case of our civilization, that's going to be Christianity. As more forces we have who are based on Christian values, the more they are going to be successful in strategic perspective. Even if their societies right now, right here, even if they are not ready enough for this, those forces are going to be the only ones who are going to win in a strategic perspective. As for BRICS, you told me, I know that you're a brilliant economist and financialist, so an entrepreneur. So I'm not going to step on the sphere of economy of BRICS and BRICS as an economic union. But I think that it's obvious that our bloc is really growing and rising with fantastic tempo, which was even hard to imagine several years ago or decades ago for sure. Well, I think there's still a lot which could be done with our help. First of all, we could have our cooperation bringing fantastic economic numbers, but it's very important that we work with our societies. You know, I know that many of your subscribers are from Brazil, so I'm sure they're going to watch this video as well. In Russia, there is a fantastically warm attitude towards Brazilians and Brazil. I think that if you make a public opinion poll, you wouldn't find, I don't know, even one Russian who would have a negative attitude towards Brazilians. Why? Because usually Brazil is associated with nice football, with great music, movies which were translated and broadcasted in 1990s mainly, but made many Russian women feel so bad for a poor Brazilian girl who is suffering so much, and etc. And that's good. And Brazilians are usually the guys who are always having some fun. They have these carnivals, etc. Only positive image. That's great. But I think that if we have a cooperation between universities of our countries, if we have more people coming and visiting, if we have movies shot together, if we have examples of people making some friendship or creating business together, and we make it publicly known, that's going to be a very important thing. I think of BRICS as a place or a platform which might be a basis for this multipolar world. Maybe one day the Americans would like to participate in BRICS as well, I don't know. If we make a platform where it's going to be obvious that we are creating new values, let's say, why is it called BRICS? I think that now it's much bigger than only BRICS. I had an idea that it would be nice to be called an alliance of civilizations or a union of civilizations. That would be great. That would be a symbol that the future is this. You know, we are creating a place where the leaders of the civilizations of the world are meeting. But what is going to be important, look, we have the trade going on, we have the trade growing, but we have also the educational rankings determined by the British private company. Why don't we have a BRICS university rating? Let's say a Brazilian guy, he wants to enter a university. He just opens the ranking and sees the best Brazilian, Russian, Chinese, South African universities. He chooses one of them. We have this guy come in here, and a Russian guy goes to, I don't know, São Paulo University or any other university. That's great because he's going to bring this experience back. He's going to have some friends. He's going to have some experience, tourism, etc. Why not making that? Why not shooting series and movies together? Why not creating computer games for our kids so that they play some stuff which provides the values which is important for us? Those are the things which my students were volunteering for a great event organized by BRICS, which was BRICS Fashion Week. And they were really so happy. They told me, thank you so much, because we've met designers from Brazil, from China. We've seen so many beautiful people there. That's a nice example, because usually I know that people who are responsible for macroeconomics, they care about numbers. Like, give me good numbers. Give me the number that were bigger than G7. That's what I want. That's good, but for people in general, those numbers, they don't mean anything. Like for a regular guy living in Moscow, he doesn't care about that. Like, okay, we are bigger than G7, then what? But if you give them some new cultural, phenomenons, like you give them movies, you give them series, you give them computer games, music, festivals. Why not having a BRICS festival first in Moscow? Then they have this competition, Eurovision, when they usually compete. Who is more severe? I don't know how to call that, because there's I'm going to use the words which are not so correspondent to my status as a professor. But when you usually watch Eurovision, the only thing you say that's a competition of perversion. Like, who is a more pervert, and from which country the most pervert guys come, or we don't even know what is that, comes there. Why not have a fantastic competition, musical competition between Russia, China, Brazil, South Africa, and other BRICS countries? That would be so beautiful. India, that would be really beautiful. Why not having, for me, my biggest desire and my real dream is having a football league where those teams are going to play, because you can imagine if you have Brazilian football players and markets of India and China combined, I think you have the biggest TV broadcast numbers ever possible.
It's totally true.
Yeah, a lot of things which could be done, and I think we need a wider dialogue between our societies. We need our societies to work together, to travel to each other, and to have more horizontal. I really believe in networking. I really believe in networks rather than hierarchies. And as soon as we create these networks around our block, I think it's going to be much better for all of us.
Okay, my last question, Professor, to you. Okay. How say, because BRICS, you have BRICS. At the same time, we have these multilateral transnational institutions like ONU, OTAN, NATO, right, United Nations, and World Bank. And these institutions still have a lot of power, and they deploy the same old vision of the Bretton Woods institutions. How do you see a possibility, and open a possibility at least, to reform the institutions, to create a real environmental landscape, to represent different perspectives of the nations, or do you keep like?
No, I think with this particular institutions, let's say with NATO, our president has once proposed them to make Russia part of NATO. So okay, if that's not against us, what's the problem? They said, no, it's not against you, it's against Iran. That what they were telling us back then, that we are putting this anti-air missile systems in the Eastern Europe because it's going to be used against Iran, not against you. But then word that, no, it was still against us. And I think that NATO was created in order to contain our country, no matter if that's called Soviet Union or Russia, it's still used for that purpose. I don't think that those organizations are, that they can be reformed in a particular way. But I think that new organizations are going to be created for sure. And in case with NATO, it's a huge question whether it's going to exist or not in the coming years, because you can see the reaction of Americans who say that maybe we are not going to defend you, or we don't like you. Also, now the former chief of the Ukrainian army, Zaluzhny, he just made a speech and he said that for tens, if not hundreds of times, several missiles, they fell on the territory of Poland or maybe Romania, I don't remember. And he said that those guys were sure that NATO is not going to help them at all, that the fifth article is not going to work. So it's about maybe creating new institutions which are going to be more correspondent to the new world which is going to occur in the coming years.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. It was a real pleasure and honor. So hope we can make the interview 1 year later to discuss
in Brazil.
In Brazil, that would be great. To discuss how the new world is really happening.
Great.
Instead of still suffering in the same way. Thank you so much for your time.
So
really
much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.